I have 5 requests from committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Mr. President, my friend from North Carolina expressed his point of view. I'd like to express mine. Do you think that those who are making incomes in America in the highest levels should pay their fair share of taxes? I do. Do you think those who got a tax break from the Trump tax plan of 4 years ago, which added $2 trillion to our deficit, should pay more in taxes? I do. Do you think we should help families who are struggling with the cost of living to defray those costs, for example, for daycare? Well, I do, and I can tell you from my family experience, so do my kids. Well, what do you think about the possibility of starting kids in school at the possibility of 3 years of age or 4 years of age, if that's the parent's choice? Is that a good idea? I think it is. And so do educators, that if kids get a flying start at education, they have a much likelier chance to succeed, to graduate, to progress to a point in life where they're making a living and more. That's part of it. So do you support, as I do, cutting the rate of childhood poverty in the United States in half? Well, I think we ought to at least do that, maybe more. If your answer was yes to these questions, what I've described is the mechanism which we're taking into the reconciliation process. It's a long Senate word for a bill that we're going to consider in about 10 days or 2 weeks. What we're trying to do is to alleviate and reduce the costs that families face. Now, it's a legitimate question raised by the senator from North Carolina. Well, who's going to pay for all this? It's paid for by people in the highest income categories. If you are making less than $400,000 a year, your taxes will not go up. That's what Biden said in the campaign. That's the standard that we've been governed by. For those who are not paying their fair share of taxes, they may have to. And I'm not nervous about the idea of putting more auditors from the IRS into looking at how much tax people pay, because I know what the numbers are. Working families, particularly those who have withholding, are paying their fair share within a few percentage points. But at the highest income level, these folks are finding ways to avoid their taxes. So working families are paying their fair share, and the wealthiest Americans, some of them, are not. So these new IRS auditors will make sure that everybody pays their fair share. How's that for a starting point? You shouldn't be afraid of hiring more cops on the beat if you're not violating the law. And that, I think, is a reality that most of us realize in life. And in terms of other payments, the corporations that are profitable, declaring millions of dollars in book gains and profits, don't you think they ought to pay something? I sure do. There ought to be a minimum tax that these corporations pay if they're profitable beyond certain million-dollar ranges. That's reasonable to me. Average Americans are paying their fair share. Small businesses are paying their fair share. But some of these folks have found ways to avoid their taxes. I think we ought to put an end to that. What's the goal here? The goal here isn't socialism, however the senator wishes to define it. The goal is to have the government give families, working families in particular, a helping hand by reducing the cost of daycare, by making more education available, by providing a child tax credit to some of these families, by providing home health services for their parents and grandparents who need a helping hand. Now, there's a very popular idea, because a lot of folks who are raising small children have to also worry about grandma and grandpa. How are they doing? Are they in a place where they feel safe and secure and are taken care of? Or if they can stay home, that's even better. That's what this bill does. The reconciliation bill provides additional assistance for those people who want to live in the independence of their home to have home health care services. I can't think of a better outcome than if that is part of what we do. And it involves government getting into the picture. For some of my colleagues, that is reprehensible. That is just pure socialism. But I might remind those who are following my remarks, when Social Security was created to give fiscal solvency to families once retired. It was branded as communism or socialism. Then came the idea of Medicare, health insurance for seniors in America in the 1960s. Do you know what the American Medical Association called it? Socialized medicine, socialism. Every time the government steps in to solve a problem which the economy can't solve by itself, the critics will always say it's socialism, it's too much government. Well, we've got to take care that the amount of government we give to this country is adequate to meet the needs of families who are struggling with the costs of living today. I believe these are steps in the right direction. Now, Mr. President, I'd like to make a statement placed in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
How does going from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds sound to you? Well, how about traversing through terrains of unimaginable challenge, or having an entire kitchen stowed away in your car wherever you go? These are just a few of the innovations being pioneered by the minds of Rivian, a company that is leading the electric vehicle revolution in my home state of Illinois. The company recently released the R1T, which Motor Trend has described as the most remarkable pickup we've ever driven. And that truck won't be built in China, and it won't be built in Europe. It will be built in the heart of Illinois, in a town aptly named Normal. The story of Normal is a story of revival and opportunity. 6 years ago, a local Mitsubishi plant shut down, leaving thousands of local workers unemployed. Today, that once shuttered factory is sprung back to life, manufacturing the first mass-produced electric truck in America. And even better, lawmakers in Illinois are now positioning Normal to continue leading the industry. Earlier this year, the state of Illinois provided more than $7 million to a community college in Normal, Illinois, to launch a program training electric vehicle technicians. Graduates of that program will be fully prepared to land good-paying jobs at Rivian or one of the other companies that are suppliers in the electric vehicle industry. Why is this good news, not just for Illinois? Each additional Rivian truck on the road will help confront the threat of climate change. Transportation accounts for more than a fourth, let me repeat that, more than a fourth of total greenhouse gas emissions. If every vehicle on the road were electric, we would well be on our way to a green future. But what's happening in Normal proves that investing in sustainable innovation drives sustainable economic growth for everyone. And it's a look into the future that Democrats envision under the Build Back Better agenda, a future in which every American can gain the skills they need to be competitive in the 21st century, and American innovators have the incentives they need to pioneer new technology. The story of Normal's revival will be on the front of my mind tomorrow as I depart for the United Nations 26th Conference of Parties Climate Summit in Glasgow. This gathering is an opportunity for the United States and our allies to come together for the first time in years around a shared goal, taking bold steps to address the climate crisis. One of those steps is the Build Back Better World Partnership, an initiative that will bring together the world's major democracies to support sustainable development in low and middle income countries. This partnership will help counter China's rising influence in the world by equipping developing nations with the resources they need to grow their economies without relying on fossil fuels. And on the note of China, Xi Jinping's absence from the COP conference in Scotland should be an alarm bell for the international community. China is the world's biggest producer of greenhouse gas emissions. They emit more than every other developed nation combined, and the country is headed in the wrong direction. Over the next decade, the Chinese Communist Party plans to build dozens of new coal plants throughout their country. China's leaders insist they're committed to addressing climate change, but the commitments they've made are inadequate. Carbon neutrality by 2060 is too little, too late. Fortunately, over the past 2 weeks, President Biden has shown the world that if you want to partner in saving the planet, follow America's lead. Work together across borders. And already the strategy is working. Yesterday, a coalition of more than 40 countries, including the United Kingdom, Poland, and Vietnam, announced they will phase out coal power over the next 2 decades. There's no doubt that the international commitments we agreed to in Glasgow are crucial to combating climate change. But the question I hope to ask our foreign allies is, What will you do the moment you return home? Climate change isn't a faraway threat. The extreme weather events over the past year have shown it's already here. Over the summer, one storm alone, Hurricane Ida, caused $100 billion in damages. One storm, $100 billion. Twice as much as Democrats have proposed to spend each year to reduce the harm of climate change. And these costs are only getting worse. Last month, our nation's intelligence community released a landmark national intelligence estimate on climate change. The report illustrated how a changing climate is one of the biggest threats to national security and economic stability. It warns that over the next 2 decades, climate change will increase global poverty and instability and could lead to conflicts and wars and dwindling supplies of food, water, and habitable land. Hundreds of millions of people are likely to be displaced by 2050. Among the 11 nations at greatest risk of collapse from climate stress by this estimate, 5 are in our own hemisphere, and 2 possess nuclear weapons in other places of the world. These humanitarian crises could also give rise to anti-democratic populists. We've seen it in Hungary. We've seen these same politicians rising in France and Germany, peddling fear and xenophobia after an influx of refugees. The NIE warns us that current policies and pledges are insufficient to meet the goals of the Paris Climate Conference. That's why the question for anyone in a position of power is, what are you doing about climate change today? Well, between the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better package, Democrats are proposing roughly $900 billion toward the climate change threat. This would be the largest investment in climate action in history. Proposals will accelerate our nation's transition to clean energy future, upgrade our power grid and the rest of our physical infrastructure, and establish America as a global leader. This could pave the way for every state to attract job creators like Rivian or Lion Electric in Joliet, which announced an electric vehicle plant earlier this year. I heard the previous speaker criticize the idea of a climate corps. It's modeled really after the conservation corps of the New Deal that goes back at least 80 years. I can't understand why we would criticize an effort to put young people to work so that they would have jobs that would improve the world we live in, the nation we live in, and make a decent income in the process. For many of these kids, this will be their first chance to really understand what life should be like. Why wouldn't we want that? I don't know about North Carolina, but in Illinois, we could certainly use their good, hard work. I got a call yesterday from the president of the Cook County Board, Tony Preckwinkle, who said we have forest preserves all over Cook County, and they are a beauty to behold, but they need basic work, and if the Climate Corps members can do it, we want to hire them locally and engage them in that process and give them a good life experience. What could be wrong with that? That these kids who might otherwise not have a chance at a job get a decent job and get rewarded for their good work with a paycheck when it's all over. For many of us, that was a formative experience we're never going to forget. There's a lot of kids who deserve it, and there's a lot to be done by this effort. I want to say at this point as I close, I see other members on the floor, that we cannot wait when it comes to climate change. There are people who want us to be at the back of the pack, for America to come in second when we're talking about changing the climate for the better in this nation and around the world. I think American leadership is needed. It has always been an inspiration to many other countries and can be again today. I thank the President for his leadership, and I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I come to the